All righty. Hi, everyone. I'm Tim McMullen. Thank you for joining. This has been, I think, now officially one of our most popular sessions we're doing on Grooper 2025. With me, Dylan Greenwood, who's going to be doing the lion's share of this. I'll let Dylan introduce himself in a second. Most of you have been on our webinars before. Real quick, we're keeping this to 30 minutes to try to be respectful of everyone's time. I will be answering in the background any questions. So we have your mics turned off. But if you do have a question, use the Q&A and we will get to it. Without further ado, Dylan Greenwood. Take it away, Dylan.
Thanks, Tim. Hey, everybody. I'm Dylan Greenwood. If you don't know who I am, I'm the Director of Product Operations here at Grooper. And I do a bunch of different things, but part of my job is talking to you guys about new features and communicate what development's been doing since the last version, 2024. And I tend to be a little long-winded, so I'm going to just jump into it and try and get this wrapped up in 30 minutes. I've got three pieces that we're going to talk about today. One is our new functionality, which I'm describing as a document specialist AI. This is really the tentpole of Grooper 2025, the AI assistant. Those of you who have been joining Tim on some of these webinars have already seen AI assistants in action. So I'm just going to kind of summarize what they are, why you would want to use them, and how to use them in the Grooper chat page and outside of Grooper as well, extending to other applications. There's also been a lot of improvement in our Grooper API with a new set of endpoints in Grooper Web Services. And in doing that, we've also implemented some OAuth support, which I know some users have requested in the past. So if you've been interested in using OAuth to authenticate the Grooper UI, we're going to talk about that a little bit today as well. And then there's just a bunch of stuff that got added in this version. There always is. Odds and ends, new ways of doing things, efficiency improvements, user experience improvements. And we'll summarize at the end some of the stuff that has been added in the version in that regard. Before I get into everything, I do want to say, if you do have questions, we've got Tim and Brad and Colin who are managing those. Just speak up whenever you need to, or I guess they type them in, right, Tim? And we'll answer them as they come in.
Just type into the Q&A and we'll get you.
Perfect. All right. So we're going to start out talking about AI assistants. AI assistants, it was kind of interesting putting this slide deck together. I didn't really want to call them a chatbot because that has some certain connotations. Chatbots are limited in a lot of ways. Everybody's familiar with ChatGPT. That is a chat client that can answer all kinds of questions. AI assistants are a little bit different. Yes, they are a chat assistant. You ask them questions by chatting with them, but they're a little bit different from traditional chatbots or the chatbots we've seen pop up over the past couple of years. Chatbots like ChatGPT, they are generalists. They know a lot of general information, but they don't know specifics. They don't know specifics about your documents, your data. AI assistants are more curated. They have access to a specific domain of information and can answer questions about it. So very succinctly, they are expert chat personas. It's a good way of thinking of them. And you talk to them about one or more connected resources. Now, while I just called these document specialists, that is really just one of the types of information that you can feed to an AI assistant. So certainly Grooper is a intelligent document processing platform. So yeah, it would make sense that a chatbot would be able to talk about document content. That includes both the full text content of a document, whether OCR'd or obtained native text, and any extracted data, so data model values. But there's other stuff that you can hook up to an AI assistant as well. Data from a database, and also you can hook it up to an API and use those responses as a source of information for the assistant. Now, why do you need them? Quite frankly, AI assistants are just better at answering domain-specific questions, answering questions about your use case, your knowledge set, your information. So what modern chatbots like ChatGPT use is a technology called a large language model. Now, LLMs are great. They know a lot. They were trained on a lot of data, basically the whole of the internet up to a certain point. But that doesn't mean that they know everything, because quite frankly, the publicly available internet they were trained on didn't have everything, didn't have your data, didn't have your documents. It doesn't have the databases you're connected to, your APIs. AI assistants can be hooked into these additional knowledge resources, which opens them up to answer questions or about that knowledge base. The other good reason to use an AI assistant is the internet is generic. So large language models are really, really good at answering generalized questions, but they're kind of bad at answering specialized questions or specific questions about one particular area. So what we have found in our development of AI assistants is that even when you do have public information, if you limit that knowledge set and supply it to the AI assistant, they can generally answer questions more accurately. Okay, now we know a little bit about them and why you might want to use them. How does it work? Is a big question that gets asked. And the short answer is it uses something called retrieval augmented generation to find and inject meaningful info into a conversation. Now, if you don't know what retrieval augmented generation, or RAG for short, what that is, the process is, basically 3-4 steps. Step one, user asks a question. So they type in their question and ask it to the assistant. Step two, that AI assistant executes what we call a retrieval plan. So it's almost like the assistant asks itself, what do I need to know to answer this question? So it goes and looks at its connected resources, whether those are documents or information in a database or whatever, and it determines, okay, well, what do I need to answer this question? Then it retrieves a document or information. Step three is the AI assistant supplements that retrieved information to the user's initial question. And it basically re-asks the question now that it has the information in hand that it needs to answer the question more effectively. And it generates a retrieval-assisted answer. And then finally, that's what the assistant spits out to the user. So step two and step three, they basically happen in the background. If you're a user interacting with an AI assistant, you're never going to see that happen, but that's how AI assistants are able to more accurately answer a question by generating a retrieval plan to find what it needs to answer the question. Any questions before we continue?
Nope. So far, so good.
Perfect. Okay. Now that's great. That's super useful. I bet it's going to be a pain to configure. Not really, quite frankly. You can get started with an AI assistant in basically 3 steps. Step number 1, you choose your model. So this is the base large language model that gets used behind the scenes to answer these questions. Step number 2, you add your knowledge resources. We'll talk a little bit more about these resources in just a second, but that process is relatively straightforward. And then step number 3 is you adjust instructions as needed. The cool thing about this new development in AI technology that we're in right now, where we're using a lot of these large language models, is these models are very adept at understanding language. So you can actually adjust how the assistant retrieves resources and how it behaves in one way, shape, or form by just typing stuff in natural language. So these retrieval instructions, this property is a mechanism that you can just type out instructions when a assistant needs to retrieve resources from, or we'll say documents from one resource or another. Or you might use the description property to adjust how it responds and kind of what its job is supposed to do, the scope of what the assistant is supposed to perform. Okay, let's talk about those resource references just a little bit. So these are the types of knowledge that you can add to this AI assistant. We've got a search index reference, we've got a database table reference, and we've got a web service reference. So a search index is for documents and their data. So if you need an AI assistant to answer questions about documents, you're going to add a reference to a search index. A couple of things about this resource. First and foremost, these documents must be in a Grooper search index. So if you're familiar with Grooper 2024, we added the Grooper search page and a way to index documents so that you could find them in the Grooper search page. You can use the same index to create an AI assistant and use those documents in that index as a knowledge resource. The really cool thing about these search indexes is the AI assistant can actually do a vector search as well as a standard search. So the Grooper search page, that's what we're calling a standard search, uses that really kind of stricter query-based syntax to find documents, but you can't ask it questions in the search page, right? You can't use natural language to find a document. That's what vector search is. So the AI assistant can actually perform that more natural language type search to find documents in the portions of the documents that are required to answer a user's question. And then finally, whenever it does retrieve that document, it's going to use the text data or the metadata or both, depending on how the assistant retrieves the content. Looks like we might have some questions coming in, or are we good, Tim?
What are you doing? I'm on them.
Okay, gotcha. Just let me know if I need to answer anything.
Okay, you got it.
The next resource reference that we have available is a database table. And this is just for data in a database. It uses a Grooper data connection to connect to SQL tables. So if you are already using database lookups or exporting data to a database using Grooper, you already know all about a data connection. You use the same object in Grooper to hook an AI assistant to a database. And in that retrieval plan that the assistant generates, it will actually execute a SQL query. So if it determines, you really need to use a connected database to answer this question, let me go do the query I need to return the information. I'll get that back and use that to answer the question. One thing of note here is, a SQL query is a SQL query. You can select rows in a database. You can also update rows in a database, right? If the data connection user does have the appropriate permissions, the AI assistant can actually both read and write to the database. This is one of the things that actually makes an AI assistant more than just a document specialist or more than just a knowledge specialist. If you configure it to do so, you could actually use it to do things. You could actually use it to update a database. Write information to a database. Kind of extends it beyond that just kind of knowledge bot, but more towards something more like an assistant, hence the name. And then lastly, we've got a web service reference. And this is useful for integrating an AI assistant with an API in one way, shape, or form. So it uses something called a RAML definition that defines the API's endpoints to connect the AI assistant to the API, basically supplying it the information it needs to make certain API calls. Then, after executing that retrieval plan, it uses the API's response to respond to the user. And this is a really, really interesting way to extend AI assistants outside the world of Grooper. So we've actually already got a client who's kind of an early adopter of our technology here, who is integrating the AI assistant with their own internal APIs. So not only does the AI assistant know a bunch of stuff of their kind of internal knowledge base, but it's also connected to their own internal API. And that allows the assistant to perform more actions and do more things, based on how that API is configured. Can't really say much more than that because, I don't want to give away this client's secrets or anything, but that's the basic idea.
We do have a question real quick, Dylan.
Sure.
A couple people asking about some of the Azure stuff. One specifically was, can we not use the Azure AI service at all? And I was initially going to say, no, it's got to use that. But then I started to think about it. If you don't configure an index, you could still connect to database tables.
Yeah, absolutely.
Web services, correct? Yeah. So there is you still could connect your resources, guys. You just couldn't, they wouldn't be vectorized, which I think would limit. Honestly, I think it would limit the the validity of your responses by not having meaning, but you definitely could.
Yeah, I mean, probably the most succinct way to say that too is, if it lives in a database or it lives in a web service, you can absolutely create an AI assistant that just has those resources. Honestly, somebody like me who's not like a SQL master or anything, hooking up an AI assistant to a database was a really easy way for me to gain insight to the data in that database. Because again, I don't really know how to make complicated SQL queries or even uncomplicated SQL queries, quite frankly, but I can certainly ask a question about that database and get a response. For somebody like me, that alone was very useful. But, if you're not going to be using the AI search service to index documents, that's just, you're not going to be able to access that document content, unfortunately.
Right. I think what we're saying is it really is limited. And realize this is a 1.0 version of our, the assistant. So And a couple of you are also saying that you can't use this, you can't use cloud technologies because your organization's decided not to. I think those things are going to change over time, but we are actively looking at, there's other vector databases out there. We just haven't chosen that as a route yet. Now, if that's an issue, please let me know, send me an email and request that. And then the more requests I get, that's how things get done around here, right? So if I get requests around, hey, we absolutely need something that's not cloud-based like the rest of Grouper can be, that makes a lot of sense. And we could absolutely do something like that. We just haven't yet.
Yep. Good point. Thanks, Tim.
Yep.
Okay. So that's a lot about AI assistants and the different types of resources that they have access to. But how the heck do you use them? There's a couple of different ways that you can interact with an AI assistant or chat with an assistant. You can chat in Grooper. You can also chat outside of Grooper as well. And let's start with in Grooper and the Grooper chat page. So when you are in the Grooper UI and you got your AI assistant created, you're ready to chat with it, you will go to the chat page to do that. So you go to that chat looking icon, that'll take you to the chat page. And from there, you can select an AI assistant from a list. So if you've got more than one, obviously you can select whichever one you want. After you select an assistant, the chat page looks something like this. If you want to start a new conversation, you press this button right here. And from there, you can enter a message down towards the bottom middle of the screen. After you enter the message, the chatbot is going to respond. So for this example here, I used a chatbot that we created internally that has access to Oklahoma legal resources, so Oklahoma laws and statutes and some case law documents as well. So I asked it a question. I hear it's illegal to take a bite of another person's hamburger in Oklahoma. Is this true? If you've heard that, that's a very common misconception about Oklahoma law. It's actually not explicitly illegal. And the chatbot pretty much said that. Said there's no specific laws that make it illegal, but it gave some additional information about why, yeah, it probably is still illegal to take a bite of somebody's hamburger in Oklahoma. And furthermore, because this chatbot is hooked up to a search index, it's actually going to tell you, how it found that information. This is another great reason to use an AI assistant. So yeah, there's probably training about Oklahoma law in the base LLM model that's being used to supply this response, right? You could go to ChatGPT and ask the same question and you'd get a similar-ish answer, but it wouldn't be nearly as specific. It would not link you directly to the statutes that were used to answer the question, for example. That's one of the things that we do with our AI assistants. So each response will also generate a set of footnotes, and these footnotes link back to documents in this search index. You can select one of these footnotes and it's effectively a link. It'll bring it up in the document viewer. That's why we're seeing a document in the right-hand panel here. If it uses a different type of resource like a SQL query or a web call, well, you're not going to see anything in the document viewer, but it'll still be listed in the footnotes as well. Furthermore, this interface is really, really helpful for people who are configuring these AI assistants. So one of the things I said earlier is it's really easy to create an AI assistant, and it really is basically 3 steps. But the process of fine-tuning or modifying an assistant's response is all about adjusting the instructions or descriptions that help generate this retrieval plan and ultimately the assistant's response. We give you a lot of insight into what's going on behind the scenes so that you can help create those instructions. So if you press this eyeball button, it's actually going to show you all of the system messages that are being relayed behind the scenes. So you could actually expand that top one that says generated retrieval plan and see exactly the retrieval plan that was generated. That is very, very helpful to adjust those retrieval instructions to, basically further control how this AI assistant finds resources and responds. Any questions before we continue?
Nope, we've had some lingering ones, but we'll address them. Let you get going because I know we're going to run out of time.
Perfect. Yeah, we are. Sorry, guys. I also want to point out that you can also extend AI assistants to other channels. So you don't have to just use AI assistants in Grooper. You can take them out into the world. So if you want to use them in Teams or on your own website or even through email or your own custom chat client, you can do that. There's a couple of ways that is possible. One is we've created an integration with Azure Bot Services. Azure Bot Services have exposure to a lot of existing chat clients and chat channels. So if you want to extend an AI assistant to Teams, like you see in the screenshot in front of you, you can do that. You can extend an AI assistant to email. You can create an embeddable iframe and put it on your website, and a lot more. Furthermore, we've created a secure method of linking to documents so that if, say, in Teams, you wanted the user to download a document that was included in a footnote or go directly to Grooper, we can include those links in the response, and they're secured by OAuth client credentials. The other option is you can use our API. So if you are a developer who's integrating an AI assistant in their own software, you can use the assistants endpoints to select assistants and send and receive messages. And that brings us to our next big development here in this version. We've got a new and improved Grooper API. So some of you might be familiar with our first iteration of APIs with our API services that you install as a service in Grooper. We've got a new way of doing things that we're calling Grooper Web Service. And this is opening up some new possibilities for us. So new endpoints, new integration options, and just new opportunities for you guys who are developers that want to use the Grooper platform and integrate it into their own applications. So what is GWS? It's a web app that gets installed with Grooper Web Client. So now the web client installer actually installs two websites, Grooper and GWS. Grooper is for the Grooper UI. GWS is for the new API set. Now, those of you who are still using API services, they are still going to work just the way they always did in version 2025. It is our eventual goal to fully replace those endpoints with GWS, but they are still going to function for the time being. So you'll be able to use one or the other or both, quite frankly. What this is going to do for us is allow us to expand our API collections infinitely, quite frankly. We've already done a lot of quick development in terms of creating endpoints. And I think even in the next build, we've got a couple of new ones. So quickly integrate new endpoints, integrate new functionality, integrate new ways of exposing the Grooper platform to you guys who are more development minded. If you go to the GWS website, you can see all of our endpoints documented. Just click on a collection to see the full list of endpoints. Any questions?
The only one I had that I wanted you to address was our release schedule, how often we do major and minor upgrades. I know that we do majors about once every year we try to do, but minor releases, that's the one I'm a little fuzzier on.
Yeah, so it kind of depends on how new the version is. With newer versions like 25, which just released last week, we tend to do weekly builds, and we'll do that for a while as we kind of hammer out any bugs in the system, potentially even add some new features that may have got overlooked. Tends to be weekly. For older builds, like say 24, about once a month is the typical schedule. But that being said, if there's any kind of go live issue, any issue that's affecting, a client's productivity and any process that is, currently in place, we try and get those out within a week. That's the basic idea anyway. Yeah, and as far as major version goes, we basically guarantee, one major version a year, and then we might fit in like a minor version. So this actually was, interesting enough, supposed to be a minor version of 24 released at the end of last year. But as we started development, we realized we needed more time and needed to allow ourselves the breadth to more fully develop the product, which is why we're releasing it as a major version this year. And so there might be a minor version like 25.1 at the end of the year, or if it's kind of like this year and we just need more time to develop, you'll see a newer major version next year. I think that answered that question.
And it's the only other one I wanted to comment on real quickly, and then we can keep going, is that we do not require Azure to run Grooper. Okay, it's just this one piece that uses Azure's AI search to store the vectors, and that's specifically around the AI assistant. So that's the only thing that we currently require a piece of Azure for. Everything else can be run on-prem.
Correct. With all of this stuff, whether you're talking about Azure or you're talking about LLMs in general and kind of the integrations that we have in the Grooper platform that extend that functionality in one way or another in Grooper, yeah, you can use it. You cannot use it. It's totally up to you.
Yep.
You're going to get a lot of utility if you do use it, but we understand some organizations are a little reticent to utilize that kind of cloud-based computing.
Yeah, we're in a weird spot right now, right? It kind of reminds me of the early days of the internet where people were like, I'm not putting my data on the internet. And, here we are 25 years later, everybody's stuff's on the internet. So, there's going to be a lot of evolution for this, and we're trying to keep right at the forefront of it. And so we had a really good question come up is, what's our recommendation for somebody who's not going to utilize the cloud stuff? Should they stay on 24? Should they go to 25? And, my gut reaction is 25 has so many other features that we've taken it forward with, and I'd recommend that. But Dylan, I'd rather, I'm a sales guy, so let me defer to you on that.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're always going to get the larger benefit of the platform by upgrading to a major version, even if you don't use something like AI assistants. We'll talk towards the end about some other improvements that are not related to AI at all. And those kinds of improvements happen all the time. Improvements in efficiency, improvements in functionality outside of artificial intelligence, they just happen. Also, quite frankly, the newer versions tend to be where newer features are developed. And, sometimes, and this is just kind of the bricks, folks, sometimes there are features that cannot be ported down to previous versions, right? If we can, we will. But sometimes the code base has just changed enough that, if you want these new features, you got to upgrade to the newest version. So I'm going to say it's always in your best interest to stay current on the most recent version of Grooper, no matter what.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on a bit. And, one of the reasons why people are asking about, hey, do I have to use Azure? Do I not have to use Azure? Is organizations are security minded, and they should be. There's good reasons for them to be. To that end, we have included OAuth support in Grooper. OAuth is a standard protocol to secure app-to-app communication. It's been around for ages now, and it's just one of the ways that applications talk to each other, and that communication can be secured. We've had some requests for OAuth integration in Grooper for a while, especially since we've got a web client now, and now we do. So there are some benefits to OAuth. One, like I said, is security. Users don't have to share their passwords with third-party authentications. They're basically authenticated using OAuth servers. Login is typically simplified, so you have to enter in those credentials less, and it's going to open up new integration options for us. Currently, Microsoft OAuth is the only supported OAuth provider. That may change in the future, but certainly, we like to integrate with Microsoft products. So if you're interested in logging in with OAuth using Microsoft credentials, we've got that option for you now. It is configurable for both the Grooper website and GWS. The difference here is, basically, are you a user or are you an application? So if you enable OAuth on the Grooper website, users are going to log in using OAuth, basically kind of like that login screen you've seen if you're a Microsoft user whenever you're logging into an app. Previous login methods are still supported, though. So if you want to use the older methods, they're not going anywhere. For GWS, we use the client credentials flow to better secure app-to-app communication. So we'll talk about Azure Bot Services, or actually, no, we already talked about that. I'm sorry. Azure Bot Services is that way to extend, one of the ways to extend AI assistance to different channels. That's required to integrate with Azure Bot Services because it's a secure method of communication between a Grooper repository and Azure. And enabling OAuth further secures those links we were talking about. Whenever a chat responds with a link to download a document or go back to Grooper, OAuth further secures that connection.
Real quick, Dylan, on the Grooper and OAuth, if you have your OAuth set up to be, because your OAuth is through your provider, which is Microsoft, so you have that set up to be using two-factor, that would still use two-factor.
Correct. Absolutely. Yep. Which is one of the reasons why people love OAuth, right? It is a super secure way of logging into an application. And as far as the setup goes, it's really pretty straightforward. There's just a few steps. First is you create an app registration for Grooper and Intra ID. Used to be Azure Active Directory. You got to make note of a couple of values there, like your client ID, client secret, and tenant ID. One thing to point out is you will disable Windows authentication and enable anonymous authentication. That doesn't mean you're going to log into Grooper anonymously. Once you do step 4 here and edit the Grooper GWS web.config file, with those client IDs, client secrets, and other values. That is what enables Grooper to authenticate using the OAuth servers. We'll have more specific documentation on how to do this too soon, but being the somewhat technical, but not crazy technical person that I am, I had one of our developers walk us through it, and it's pretty straightforward. Okay, that's it for AI assistants and GWS and OAuth, but there's a lot more. Now, for those of you who are kind of short on time here, I'm going to encourage you to go to our Grooper Wiki and check out our What's New in 2025 article. This has all the information we've covered and more, quite frankly, because there's a lot of stuff that just got packed into this version through the development cycle. One of them is a brand new import provider. HTTP import is a way of importing web content, basically anything from an
Did we lose Dylan? Brad or Colin? Can you guys hear me? Okay, looks like we might be having some challenges with Dylan. He dropped off. Okay. Man, we lost his slide. We're at the bottom of the hour anyway. So as Dylan was going through, there are quite a bit of other things in 2025 that we just didn't get to. I apologize. He was going through HTML imports. And if you haven't seen that, what we're doing there is we can actually now ingest a website. It's not complete web scraping. I'm sorry, somebody coming back in. It's not complete web scraping or RPA, but it is a really good way to add some resources to your repository. And specifically, it was designed around bringing in large sets of data for usage for an AI assistant. We have, like I said, we have a bunch of other things on there. And what we can probably also do, we may need to do a second session of this to cover some of the other minor features that we did not get to cover. So, and since we are past hour, I'm going to go ahead and bring the call down because we're still recording and I don't see Dylan coming back on. So his machine probably did bad things to him. So I greatly appreciate.
Yes, he lost connection.
Okay. I'm not going to worry about it then. We were damn near at the end of it anyway. I greatly appreciate everybody hanging out for this. Obviously, there's a lot of need here. You all know that my door is always open. Please feel free. If you had questions on this, send me an email, give me a call. I'm happy
There's Dylan.
And track down answers for you. Oh, he's coming back. Never mind.
Sorry, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we are.
I just totally lost internet connection. I'm sorry, guys.
Not a problem. I just got some of the HTML for you. HTML and
perfect.
You can skip to the next thing you had after that. We can pick it up.
Perfect. Okay, let me share out my screen again.
Have enough documents that we still need to cover. We can do this. We can do a second one of these if we need to.
I can probably make this pretty quick.
Okay, because we can post it and have it live there. So go ahead.
Okay, so Tim talked a little bit about the HTML import. There's also some new commands that help process HTML, kind of condition them, get them ready for view and Grooper, and also get them ready to go to an AI assistant. The other big thing, and this is one of those things I really did want to get to, we've got a lot of new productivity helpers in Grooper. These do use an LLM to make your life easier in Grooper. So this is one we've already got in Grooper, which generates a data model using a prompt to a large language model. So you can give it simple, real, natural language instructions like generate a data model for PO-based invoice processing, and it makes a pretty data model like this. We've got a lot more that are in this version. We've got ones to help you do regex. We've got ones to help you write a SQL query for a lookup. We've even got ones that can help write code expressions in Grooper. These are, definitely great tools to get started when you don't exactly know what you're doing. I wish I would have had this when I didn't know anything about regex, for example. And you can do stuff like this. Just write out, hey, help me write a pattern to match currency values. The AI assistant will generate that expression for you, and then you can use it in Extractor. There's a few other efficiency improvements. Fill Descendants is a new fill method. If you're heavily invested in AI extract and you're using it on multiple data sections, this is a way to increase efficiency by running those AI extract operations in parallel rather than serially. We've made some additional efficiency improvements to activity processing services in general. Everybody uses those, so another good reason to upgrade to 25. And some improvements to dispose batch for making long-term archive of batches in Grooper more efficient as well.
Gee, Dylan, why would we want to keep batches around?
Great question. If you are using AI search, to index documents, you got to keep them in group. And if you're going to do that, using the dispose batch activity to move those to an archival location is a great way to do it. Removing the job history is a great way to increase your system's performing by just getting rid of data you don't need. For those users who are using AI search, we've made some improvements there. We've got better saved query management. So now you can save them and access them in a list and to the left of the UI, which can also be collapsed to get it out of your view. We've also increased some visibility into your index count, your AI search usage data, and index data as well. Makes it a lot easier to manage AI search from Grooper if you don't have access to the Azure portal, for instance, like I do. There is a new reports tab. I want to point this out because this saved my butt earlier this week trying to troubleshoot an issue for a client. This used to be the summary tab on content types like content models. We realized there was really a lot of information there, like information about expressions and property overrides and descendants and stuff like that. It's all great information, but it was really cluttered. And, when we got to the point where it's like, hey, we'd really like to add more here, it was difficult for us to do that. So now we have this reports tab. That information is selectable by this drop-down list. And the one I want to point out to you is we've got a circular expressions report, which helps you track down circular references in expressions. These don't always cause problems, but they can crash your web server when they do, which is not good, right? So last week, I was able to use this report to quickly identify a circular expression, find it, fix it, and move on. The client was able to move on with their solution in almost no time. There is a new way of doing our new interface for searching inside of a document. This is something that's been requested in previous versions of Grooper. Once you're in a document viewer, it sure would be nice if you could just search for a word or a phrase or even do some light regex from that document viewer UI. Now you can. Look for that search button. That's going to bring up a search editor that allows you to search for phrases or even do some simple regex searching from any document viewer. Doesn't matter if you're in a review panel, doesn't matter if you're in the search page, doesn't matter if you're in a extractor editor. Anywhere you got a search, anywhere you got a document viewer, you're going to have access to this document search capability. In-document search capability, I guess is what I should call it. And last but not least, we've got a new way of uploading documents to Grooper. Grooper's always been great at batch processing large amounts of documents, but it's been kind of a pain to bring in like a single document and run it through a batch process. This is more along the lines of transactional document processing. From the batches page, you can now do that. Hit that upload button. You can select one or multiple files from a folder browser, select a batch process, hit OK, and Grooper's going to create a batch for you. Okay, guys, sorry for the interruption in the middle of all that. So apologize for kind of running through all of that fairly quickly at the end there. But we've got some great stuff in 2025, AI assistants and the chat page for sure, new developments in our API, and then a slew of features throughout the Grooper platform as well. Appreciate your time, guys. Any questions before we wrap up?
The last one we had was, will we be offering a basic search in the future? And that runs, that basically runs not on Azure. Right. And I just answered that, we're not sure yet. Right. We've talked about that. It's not on the roadmap currently. We were kind of hoping that Azure would come out with AI search in a container so that we could run this locally. But This is we're keeping a very close eye on. And I've got at least 2 of you now that have requested this on this webinar. So anybody who would like to see this all be all encompassed and be able to run on-prem, please send me an email. Let me know, because I need that data to be able to say, hey, look, there's value here. There's people who want this to take us another direction. Because you can imagine that when you've integrated with one type of product like a vector search database, it's not trivial to just rip that out and go down another path. Even though they're the same thing, these are not as easy to do. But it's something I honestly think that I see us having to do that at some point. But it's not on the roadmap currently, to be honest.
Yep.
And I think that's all we have then, right? No other questions coming through. I greatly appreciate everybody's attendance again. Thank you so much, everybody, for sticking with us through the internet problems. And again, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us. Our door is always open. Thanks much, everybody. We'll send out the recording tomorrow, probably tomorrow afternoon by the time we get it all done and set. Thanks much. Have a great week.
Thanks, guys.